It is impossible to be a problem and a solution simultaneously. I come before you today to ask a simple question. Are you a problem or are you a solution? I am the oldest daughter of a divorced mother who taught her children the value of perseverance and compassion. She worked really hard to make sure that we had what we needed. My senior year and first semester of college were a very turbulent time. A few weeks before I graduated high school, my mother announced that she had contracted AIDS from a man she planned to marry. I went off to college, came home for my senior year, and when I came home, I didn't recognize her anymore. She'd gotten so sick so fast. 3 months later, she'd passed away. She passed away. But what happened when my mom passed away was I was absolutely sick from grief. I developed a lot of bad habits in an effort to self-soothe. My zest for life absolutely diminished. I didn't want to do anything, but my aunt insisted that I go to school. As a result, I was actually expelled from not one, but 2 technical colleges. But one thing my aunt did say is, if you're not going to go to school, you're definitely going to go to work. So I went to work here in Columbia at a chemical plant. My mother was one of 7 women in an entire chemical plant, so I followed in her footsteps. There was a woman who worked with me who I believe had been watching me for a while. She was retiring, and she sat me down one day before she retired and said, "What are you doing here?" She went on to explain that I was too smart to spend the next 30 years of my life in a plant working like she did. And she strongly, strongly suggested that I go back to school. In that experience, I heard my mother's voice saying something that she often said, "Finish what you start." So I enrolled in a local HBCU. I was doing really well. I was on the dean's list. I was very much so focused. And I started working with an after-school program. I loved it. It wasn't an easy job, but it was a fulfilling job. On the first day, I was given a pack of snacks, a few coloring books and some crayons, and given the directions to go and teach in the middle of one of the most dangerous neighborhoods here in the city. But like I said, I loved it. I enjoyed watching the young people learning and their hunger to want to know what I knew. And it fed me and it fueled me in the time that I needed it most. One day, I was on campus, and like I said, things were going well. I was on campus, and there was a testing van for HIV/AIDS. I was tested, and I tested positive. So 7 years after my mom's passing, I too was diagnosed with AIDS. It didn't stop me though. As a matter of fact, it propelled me into wanting to live a more significant and a more efficient life. So I came here to Columbia College, and I enrolled in the Child and Family Studies program here. And I said, I'm going to give this college thing one more time. And so I did that. And when I enrolled here, I started volunteering at the after-school program that's here. It was called Clubhouse. It was started by students from the education department. And so I worked with Clubhouse to get my service learning hours completed. When they were completed, I stayed as a volunteer. A few weeks before I graduated, I was summoned to one of the professor's office and offered the job as program manager. The program had recently gotten a federal grant, and it was going through a major transition. The previous director resigned. I accepted that offer. Accepting that offer challenged me because not only had I worked with after-school programs, I had also kind of worked my way up the ranks, from a volunteer to a youth worker to a youth advocate to a senior youth advocate. So it kind of seen how the programs operate as a worker, but not so much as a program manager. But I had ideas. I had a lot of ideas on how to better serve our community. I graduated. One of the grant's major ideas was about family engagement and making sure that the families that we served were involved. So one of the first things I did, this is my staff. My staff was usually made up of about 20 to maybe 25 college women. So it was never a dull moment. So we planned this family night. And from out of nowhere, within the community, there was this skepticism about parents not wanting to be involved in what's happening extracurricular with their children, and parents maybe not wanting to be involved with something, like a literacy night. And so my staff and I, we prepared, and we got the kids excited. And lo and behold, family night happens, and over 100 parents, grandparents, cousins, grandparents, godparents showed up in the name of literacy. Something else happened that night. The fathers, brothers, and uncles who looked something like the scary guys we see on the news who we're supposed to be afraid of, they collected the trash and made sure that those who needed help getting to their cars that night got that help. Those grandmothers who laughed loud, and some of them might have been missing teeth, but they gathered together in the kitchen, rolled up their sleeves, and made sure that the meal that we were going to serve was going to be served right. Those mothers, they gathered together. Some of them might have been wearing their work uniforms, but they gathered together to make a plan to see how they could work together to make sure that their children were safe and had something to do on Fridays, because we operated Monday through Thursday. That night, a village was born. Unfortunately, that grant funding ended 2 years later. I was notified that my contract was not going to be renewed, and so I was stuck trying to figure out what's next for me. I decided that I would apply for a master's program at Loyola University Chicago. It was a social justice and community development program. I was shockingly accepted. So in 2011, with a dorm assignment, a few belongings, and an acceptance letter, I relocated my life to Chicago to investigate why so many of the children that I worked with had poor education, were living in poor housing, and received poor medical care. I also used that opportunity to find my voice. During my second year at Loyola, I had the opportunity to take what was known as the Kenya Immersion course. Honestly, it was a glorified field trip. But it was a field trip that was designed to study what happens when the same social issues that happen in America are addressed in Kenya. My colleagues and I were assigned the task of choosing an issue that we were passionate about, to research it and become the expert of that issue. While we were there, I encountered this woman. Her name is Mary Mathoni Wandiri. She was a social worker who got tired of collecting AIDS orphans. She decided that somehow, some way, there had to be another way. She decided that healthy children come from healthy mothers. She resigned from her position and created a program called Living Positive Kenya. What happened next was beyond her wildest dreams. She started a support group with 5 women. In 4 months, that support group swelled to 45 women. At this point, hundreds of children and women have come through the doors of Living Positive Kenya. I was so fascinated and so impacted by her work, I went back to Living Positive Kenya, not this time for a field trip, but as an intern. While I was there, I learned that true innovation comes from challenges. It's our will to overcome them that's a testament of our power as humans. So I ask you, what if the problem is the solution? What if those that we deem in our social systems, who we tally and we count data as problems, are actually the solution? What if those people that oftentimes are not sitting at tables where decisions are made actually hold the wisdom and the genius needed to not only curtail some of our biggest social issues, but actually end them? Can you imagine a formerly homeless person actually being at the table for policymaking at the Salvation Army, or a formerly incarcerated youth having access to program development for the Department of Juvenile Justice? I suggest that the problem is the solution. One of my favorite writers, Marianne Williamson, says, "It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure." Are you a problem, or are you a solution? Thank you.